I'm Jono Buchanan, and in this video we're going to be looking at some extended MIDI editing techniques. In this project I've got two sounds set up. I've got a little synth pluck sound and I've got an accompanying bass line, and together they sound like this. Okay, so it's a promising start, but it's just that. I've only got 2 bars of information. Now the first thing to say is that there's no real reason why this track is starting with its information in bar 2. So let's learn how to move regions around. I can select both of these by simply clicking anywhere where there is no information and drawing a box around these two things. And you can see that as I move that box over the regions, the first one is selected and then the second. So using this kind of lassoing technique is really useful for selecting things within the arrangement. What I'm then going to do, having selected them both, is simply move them back to the beginning of bar 1. And similarly, I can move this data anywhere. I can have it start in bar 11 or 17 or back where I started. So moving regions around is very straightforward. Just be clear, it's a good idea to deselect them by clicking outside of those boxes when you've finished. So I've still only got 2 bars of information, but we're now sort of starting at the beginning of the track. So how do I make this sequence last for longer? Well, again, I could select both of these regions, and I could select the loop option, which is here in the MIDI region editor. By selecting loop, what will happen is that these 2 regions will play forever. Until I stop those loops, they're just going to keep playing around in a 2-bar cycle. And so on. Now, if I don't want them to last forever, that's fine. What I can do very easily is simply interrupt these loops by creating a new object which will then stop them from playing. So this brings us to Logic's toolbox, which contains the tools which allow us to navigate the program. So if I press T, I can bring up that toolbox, and here is a long list of potential tools that I might want to use, including the pencil tool. And if I select the pencil tool and simply click where I want the regions to stop, then you can see that the loop is interrupted. Again, going back to the toolbox again, I have a chance to reselect my pointer tool, the main tool that we use most of the time within Logic. And if I wanted to, I could throw those away. Now, of course, by throwing them away, we get our loops back to the full length that they were before. So potentially another way of having this information repeat a few times before stopping might be useful. Let's look at another way of achieving the same result. Again, I'm going to select both of these, and then I'm going to turn the loop off. Now, the key command for copying within Logic is very straightforward. I can hold down the Alt button here and simply click on these regions and drag them to the position where I want them to be copied to. And for as long as I hold my finger down, now by using the pointer tool, I can copy them as many times as I like, and I'm only limited to the number that I copy. I don't have my loops stretching on endlessly. So we're just beginning to work with manipulating MIDI in various ways. Now, let's suppose I actually just wanted 1 repeat, so we had a 4-bar sequence. At the moment, I've actually got 2 lots of 2 bars. It'd be useful for me to be able to glue these together and create a 4-bar sequence from the 2 lots of 2 bars that I've got at the moment. But I don't want to glue all of this information together. I'll show you what I mean. If I select all of these options and select my toolbox again, I can come back, and within here, I've got the option for the glue tool, which will allow me to glue these sequences together so that they become one. The only problem with that is that because I've selected all of this information, if I do that, all of that will be folded down onto one track. So now my baseline information is being played back by the synth, which isn't what I want at all. So another useful key command, Command and Z, and that's undo. That takes me back a step to where I started. This time, I want to select the 2 regions for the synth first of all, and I can do that by obviously drawing a box around them from one side, or I can simply click on the track, which selects everything within that track, and then I can glue those together. And I can do the same thing for the bass line underneath, and now we have those 2 regions glued together, but they have remained separate. So we've now got a little 4-bar sequence, which we've created out of the 2, and again, toolbox and back to the pointer tool allows me to get back to where I started. So what I can do with the information within any MIDI region is that I can then apply a series of commands to it up here in the top left-hand corner in what's called the MIDI inspector. What I'm going to do here is to select this synth sequence, and I'm going to restrict its velocity response by selecting dynamics and coming to fixed, which is going to make all of those velocities the same. And then I'm going to create a velocity offset, which takes them all up by 25 steps. They're now going to be exactly the same. Now, to make that change permanent, I'm going to select Control and N, which is what we call normalize sequence parameters, which is a posh way of saying that the changes that we make in that box are made a permanent fixture of that region. And if I double click on that region, we have a chance to launch the editor within the piano roll display down here within Logic at the bottom, which allows me to see that change. You can see that the color of all of these MIDI notes is the same, which is showing me that the velocity is even throughout. Now you can see that actually the note lengths, whilst they're all quite short and quite spiky, they do change a little bit as well. And that might be another parameter that I'd want to change. How do I make what's called the gate time, the length of each note, exactly the same? Well, again, that's a control that we can affect up here in the top left-hand corner in the region inspector here. What I can do is to come to gate time, and I can make those notes fixed as well. And again, using my key control of Control and N, what I can do is to make all of those notes incredibly short, and they're all exactly the same length. Now, if I solo this track, which is a very useful way of being able to hear just this track without the bass line, we'll hear just how spiky these notes now are. Okay, now they're actually a little bit too short. What I want to do now is to make all of these notes a little bit longer. It's useful that I've made them all the same length, but now I want to change the length of all of them. Well, this is where the piano roll editor starts to come into its own. What I can do down here is to either select an individual note to make a change to its values, or I can select all of the notes here to make a global change to all of the notes within a sequence. And that's what I want to do this time. I'm going to click here and use a key command, which is Command and A, which selects all. Everything is now selected. Everything is highlighted. And that means that if I hover over one note and make a change to it, that change will affect all of the notes within the sequence. Now, if I click on the very bottom right-hand corner of a note, you can see that its information pops up onto the screen in front of me. I can see the pitch of the note that I've selected, and I can see its velocity. Remember, we created an offset of 25 steps, which is why it's velocity 89. If I then hover over this note and drag it out to the right-hand side, all of the notes of lengths will change. So you can see that by affecting one, because all of the notes are selected, they will all change. So I can make them all 1/16th note long, and now we won't have quite the same level of short spikiness we had before. Okay, so we can now hear there's a little bit more substance to those notes. So the piano roll editor allows us to change the note length, and by selecting Command and A to select all notes before we make that change, we're making a change to everything. If I selected just one note, by the way, you can see that just this note length is changing and all the other ones are remaining as they were before. So I can couple them all together by selecting Command and A, or I can select just a single note. And that's quite useful if you want to be able to make an individual velocity change, for instance, to one note, or a note length change to just one note. Now, by hovering over the piano roll display here, I also have access to my toolbox. If I press T down here, I get a range of tools which allow me to work with the editor down here, including that velocity tool that I mentioned a moment ago. If I decided that I suddenly wanted these 5 notes here to all be quieter, I can draw a box around them by selecting them as we have before. And then I can click and hold on these notes and drag their velocity up or down. So as you can see, these notes are now a different color because they're stronger. They have more bite to them and they're louder. So I've made a change to just those notes. Remember, if you want to get back to where you started and undo a step, Command and Z will take you back to where you were before.